All right, so before we start, let's talk about what Laravel actually is. So it's an open source PHP framework, and it's on the same level as something like Symfony, CodeIgniter, Zend. You may have heard of some of these. And like most of these frameworks, it uses the MVC or Model View Controller design pattern, which I'll talk about in a second. Laravel is arguably the most popular framework for PHP. It's used to build pretty much any kind of database driven website or application. It can be used with multiple types of databases as well. In this course, we'll be using MySQL, Postgres, and SQLite. So MVC is a design pattern that separates certain functionality into either a model, a view, or a controller. So the model is where the app works with the database or the data. It's responsible for fetching data, inserting, updating, and so on. So all the data related logic goes here. The view is the part of the application that the end user sees, the HTML, the templates, the user interface, interacting with buttons. This is all done in the view. And then the controller is what takes requests, such as GET requests. So if you visit a certain URL in your browser, that's going to make a request to the controller. If you submit a form, that'll be make a post request. And also it takes requests like puts for updates and also deletes. All right, so the way that we install Laravel is with Composer, which is a PHP dependency manager or package manager, similar to NPM for Node.js if you've ever worked with that. It's used to install Laravel as well as create an application. All right, so you can either do it like this, Composer global require, the installer, and then you can actually run Laravel new and then the application name, or you can just use Composer create project and just say Laravel/Laravel and then your application name. So very easy. We'll be using this method. So Laravel also comes with a tool called Artisan, which is a command line interface, and it's absolutely fantastic. It makes things so much simpler. You can easily create controllers and models, database migrations, and so on. You can run migration files. So when we want to, for instance, create a users table, we don't have to go into MySQL or whatever database we're using and manually do that. We can simply run a migration file and specify what fields we want and so on, and we can just run that. Okay, it also includes a tool called Tinker, which allows us to interact with the database from the command line. So we can insert data, we can fetch data and so on from the command line. So here's some examples of some CLI commands. So PHP artisan list will actually list all the commands that you can use with artisan. You can use help if you want to see what a command does. If you want to create a controller, you can use make controller and then the name of it. You can also make models, and by attaching the -m here, you'll actually create a migration file for that model. Okay, now if you want to create a custom migration file, you can do that. So for example, this is add post to DB, and we can specify the table name. And then once we want to actually run the migration files and create the database tables, we can do PHP artisan migrate. All right, and then if we want to use Tinker in the command line, we can say PHP artisan Tinker. There's other commands, but these are some of the most popular. All right, so Laravel also uses something called Eloquent, which is an ORM, which stands for Object Relational Mapper, and this uses active record and makes it very, very easy to work with the database. So for instance, if we want to, let's say, get all the flights from the flights table, instead of doing, select all from flights and, doing our custom SQL, we can simply say flights equals flight all, and that'll fetch all the records, and then we can just loop through them with a for each loop. All right, now if we want to add parameters like a where clause and order by, we can simply chain onto that model. All right, so it makes things very easy to interact with the database. Now, as far as our views, Laravel uses Blade by default, which is a simple but powerful templating engine. It doesn't restrict PHP in views. We can use, interpolation, but we can also use straight PHP. All right, so it's compiled into plain PHP and it's cached with no overhead, so it's extremely fast. And then views can extend layouts, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. we can have one layout with, all the HTML head tags and all that, and then we can extend each view to use that layout. All right, and here's an example of a layout. So you can see we have basic HTML, and here we're yielding a dynamic value, which is the title, and then here we have the main content. So when we create a view and we extend this layout, this is where the view is going to be put. And this is an example of a view that extends a layout called app.blade.php inside of the layouts folder. All right, and we can add a title, and we can add the main section or the main content. All right, so that is a very brief summary of what Laravel is and what it does. So let's move on and get started with installing it, setting it up, and then getting into the first project.